In the past few days, I've been asked the question a lot: should I be sitting off around my enclosure to do a trunk wall? So oftentimes people either have one or two subs, like a 15 or two 15s or two 12s, and they're asking me, are they gonna gain by sitting off the deck about under the back glass and around the enclosure? Similar to what I have currently in my Malibu. That is a trunk wall. As you can see, it's sealed off around the sides, and the deck under the carpet is sealed off also. Okay, so for this matter, we're going to be starting by the pros of doing a trunk wall. So the first thing I would like to mention is the fact that once your trunk wall, sorry, my trunk is really loud. So the first thing I would like to mention about the pros of doing a trunk wall would be reduced trunk flex. So, as most people know, oftentimes when you want to get louder in the trunk build, you have to tie down the trunk, bolt it down, and to really have that maximum output out of your trunk build. That's one thing that you don't have to do with trunk walls, simply because they're not losing pressure from the pressure vents. That can be blocked, of course, but there's pressure vents on either side of the trunk, and then there's the fact that air and pressure is escaping through the flex of the trunk. There's air escaping from every little pinhole size everywhere. So every little hole that's in your trunk, could it be from the flex of the trunk leaving a gap, anything is an escape of pressure. So doing a trunk wall is really good for that. That removes one of the worst places for pressure to leave, to escape in a car, is the trunk. The general gain of sealing off a trunk wall, let's say that your trunk wall is really solid, it's going to be right around 4 dBs. If you're going, it's generally around 2 or 4 dBs, no more, no less. There's going to be exceptions, of course. The vehicle makes up for a good part of how much you're going to gain. The more solid your vehicle is, the better it's going to be. Myself, I have a Malibu LT 2015, so it's a really solid vehicle overall. As you can see, I braced my window, I braced my back glass, because those are the things that were moving the most. The doors flex quite a lot, but from what experience, strapping them down didn't make a difference, so I left them that way. So this one can be a pro or a con, okay? So trunk walls usually peak in between, for the ported box trunk walls, not the 6th order or 4th order or bend pass, any type of bend pass enclosure, or horns or T-lines. This is specifically for ported box trunk walls. They're generally gonna peak in the 30 to 40 hertz range. There's exceptions, of course. There's always exceptions. There's always gonna be somebody, no, I peak at 23 hertz and stuff. That's, in general, they peak between 30 and 40 hertz. So there's a formula that you can use to figure out the length . So once you tune around those lines of whatever gave you the peak frequency of your cabin, that's where your trunk wall is going to be really loud. That's where it's going to get nasty. That's where it's going to get windy. That's where the cabin is going to pressurize really good. And that's where those trunk walls really perform well. It's around the cabin resonant frequency, even more so in a trunk wall. Being said, the more solid your cabin is, the louder you're going to get on cabin gain. So you have to have a really solid cabin. On cheaper cars, it's going to be a little bit harder, a little bit more work, but anyone can achieve it, in my opinion. Those are the pros of the trunk walls: louder output, better SPL efficiency. They can be considered decent for SQ also, because there's less rattle, but personally, I don't really do SQ, so people that are gonna be more into SQ can tell you more about the fact that those can be used for SQ. But that's my take, is that there's barely any rattle when you own a trunk wall, as long as the cabin is decently solid, because most of the rattle in a car comes from the trunk. Now we're going to be talking about some of the cons, and those are quite to be considered. Major con of a trunk wall that I find that is going to be one of the reasons why people don't do them is that they're quite hard to build. Not in the sense that they're harder than a wall, just that it's quite a bit of work, because in most cases when you're going to go with two 12s or two 15s, in some cars, a majority of the cars, I'm going to say, you're going to have to build the enclosure directly inside the trunk and not outside, because the enclosure is going to be too big to fit, to slide into the trunk. That's the case for this build. There's some trunks, there's some bigger trunk openings in some cars, and there's I know Civics for a fact have a big trunk opening, so it makes it easier, but that's just a little thing that you have to measure before doing a trunk wall, because it can be a hassle. Another con that people are gonna be, people are probably gonna bash on me about this one. It's the fact that trunk walls often have reduced power handling. The reason for that would be that in a trunk wall, in a trunk setup, sorry, you're gonna be loading inside the trunk in a very tight space. Here's an example of what I'm telling you. What it looks like firing inside the trunk versus firing in the cabin. So those are my two XV3s, and here's my port. So I brought this piece of wood right here to emulate as if it was firing into the corner of a trunk. So right here in between the port and the piece of wood, there's going to be a very high SPL being built up, and that's on a very small scale. In the trunk it's even more prominent, but you'll see what I mean. When I bring up the piece of wood to the port, you should see the subs moving a little bit less. Hopefully it shows up on camera. So the reason for that is that when you're firing inside the trunk, your setup is pushing against something inside the trunk. It's making a lot of pressure inside the trunk. So it gives more air spring for the subs, so it makes them move a lot less than if you're pressurizing a cabin. Because the cabin, even if it gets stupid loud, is still going to be a lot less pressurized than having your subs facing in a trunk, which is normal because the cabin is much bigger. So that means mechanically they're going to be moving a lot more with the same power because you're pressurizing a cabin, so it makes a lot less air spring. That's one thing to consider. A lot of people are telling me to put an 8K on those XV3s, and by my experience, there's going to be exceptions, of course. By my experience, this JP33 at half ohm is already making them dimple, and my box is under recommended. It's at 4.9 or 4.8 cubic feet. I don't remember because I keep playing around with it, but it's around those lines, and it's tuned to 28 hertz. So it's not crazy big or anything like that. It's just the way that a trunk wall loads on the subs and in the port makes it like that. So that's one thing to consider. If you're going to put a 12K on subs that are 2000 watts RMS, it's not going to work. Unless you go with a very, very small enclosure, which then makes you a little bit less efficient, which is not always something people are looking for when competing. And of course, as you expect, another con would be that you lose cargo space, obviously. But I think that if you're deciding between doing a trunk wall or not, you're kind of aware that you're going to lose cargo space. There's also the fact that it requires quite a bit more material. They're a lot more expensive. Well, a little bit more expensive They're usually very permanent. Tearing one of those out is no fun, especially if you built the enclosure inside the trunk. You have to use like a chainsaw or some shit to take it out. It's absolutely painful. It's not fun to do by experience after tearing out. This is, I believe, my 5th trunk wall in this Malibu. It's seen a lot. It's been through a lot of things, but every time I tear one out, I want to cry. And last but not least, what I believe to be the worst con for someone like me that likes to test things out and chase numbers a little bit, not in the SPL way, but in efficiency way, is that trunk walls are very permanent. So if you want to play around with your enclosure, let's say you have a ported box loose in the trunk, you can spin it around, flip it, do a bunch of things, take it out, work it inside the home. You can, do a bunch of stuff with your enclosure. While if it's a trunk wall, if you want to move the port from this side to this side, you have to rebuild it completely. And that's something that really pisses me off a little bit. You're gonna say it was my choice to do a trunk wall, and it was, and I love it, but I would have loved to try having the port the other way and do a lot of tests and figure out what's best. But once you're sealed off, things are staying like it is. You can play around with flares and flaring this part and all that stuff, but oftentimes you're stuck with what you have. And that's one of the things that I hate the most about trunk walls, is that I am stuck with what I have. And I've done a lot of modifications that did help me gain, but after a while you're really stuck. You're stuck there. You can't. I have trouble gaining more decibels because of that. I'm stuck at a 152.4 at 31 hertz, and I've been stuck there for a while, and kind of get a little bit difficult to have a little bit more. While I think that with a lot of work, a trunk setup could potentially get louder than what I have currently. Even though I said that SPL is easier to squeeze out of a trunk wall because of the pressure loss in the trunk, I believe that sometimes, in certain cases, you can still get louder out of a trunk because of that, because you have a lot more testing room in a trunk than in a trunk wall. So that's one thing to really consider. Yeah. So that is about it for the pros and cons. If you guys want to see a more explaining video of how trunk walls work, roughly, I'm not a sound engineer. That's just the way that I've tested things and figured out a lot of stuff through experiences and building many trunk walls. Just feel free to comment, and I'll give you a more explaining video of how to gain and how to have a little bit better bandwidth and stuff like that, which is often problems that people face with trunk walls. So let me know, and let me know in the comments if I should do this video. And also feel free to like and subscribe. It's my first time doing this sort of video. I usually just post some speaker videos without any explanation or anything like that. So just let me know, and it was great talking to you guys. You have a good day. Bye.